Hello, hello, I'm Kads, and welcome back to the free-to-play review. So today's topic is going to be the latest iteration of the Heroes path, specifically the Devious path. And yes, this is officially the path that is going to offer the guaranteed opportunity to get Varkos Head Splitter. Now, Varkos is a fairly unique champion in his own right. He has a lot of relatively basic attacks. A double hitter here that can ignore unkillable, double hitter here, single target once again, that can ignore block damage and shield. But the things that he ignores are relatively meta in the game, and more importantly, the synergy really comes into his kit when he's paired up with ally attacks, as you can see here, or counterattacking here where he gets 3 hits instead of the 2. So he's a decent champion for helping deal with Mercurial, just because he can get good hits off one to break the last stack, and the second one will be a hit, and he does have relatively decent multipliers as well. But it all kind of comes together with the A3 extra turn ability here, but he gives himself increased defense, so he's a self-buffing nuker, which you always love to see. He gives a counterattack so that he can synergize with either of his abilities, and then he also gives himself shadow, which means he's ignoring 50% defense on top of whatever else you might have in terms of his build and or masteries. The icing on the cake is that this passive here, one, he just has like a Ronda-esque passive where he has a chance to join in on random attacks from your allies. It's higher when that you use someone from the Dark Elves, but the most important thing is that enemies killed by this champion when he's counterattacking or an ally attack cannot be revived. So kind of an Anithwi Blood Twin-esque thing here, where essentially as long as he's doing it, getting a kill outside of his active turn, he will block revive no matter what. So it could be an A1 counterattack, could be an A1 ally attack, could be something else. It really just depends on what the circumstances are, but it's really just one of those champions who can always be a threat because block revive in most cases cannot be undone. So anyways, in my particular instance, I am interested in getting the champion on my account, so I will be going for him, but of course we're not going to be pulling on day one, as is my typical approach to these events. And speaking of which, let's talk about what the event entails. Obviously, we kind of know what the major tagline is, but what else is up for grabs from the Devious path? So if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, you can see a pretty unique looking path here. The champion here is on the left, his soul, 5-star soul, is on the right, and unfortunately those are completely divested paths. And then if you're more inclined to go for relic fragments, you do have an opportunity to get up to 100 mythical fragments. And of course, when it comes to Heroes path, the first thing I always look for is where are the keys. You can see there are 4 key nodes, and do we start off with 1 key? And in this case we actually do. So if your goal is to get one thing from any of the paths, you already have the 1 key that you need. But if you do want to go down multiple paths, you will need to get one of the key nodes here, either the bottom of the relic, beneath the relic fragments, or beneath the champions and or the soul. Now of course, because there is a champion and a soul up for grabs, the cost for getting either of those is going to be relatively high, and in this case, because of how divested they are, the cost of getting both of them is extremely high, as we'll get to a little bit later. But let's highlight some of the most commonly pursued paths that we might see in this particular path. Starting off, we have the mythical tome here on the right hand side. There is no legendary tome up for grabs, which is kind of interesting, at least nothing along the way. Could have been nice to have that as a reward, but nonetheless, instead of a 5-star chicken, maybe, or this barrel. But I digress. But yeah, mythical tome, that's probably the cheapest thing if you wanted to be one and done. Again, you already have the 1 key you need, so you can just come down the right hand side and then grab that, and that would be a total of 36,800 points. If you wanted to go a bit further and get the soul for the champion, it's a little bit cheaper than the champion himself, or you're in the situation where you happen to have pulled him from a summon pool or just from your shards because he is currently actively in the pool, then you could just go for the soul. That would be 86,800 points. On the flip side, if you wanted to go down just the left hand side with the free key, then it would cost you 89,300 points just to go down the entirety of the left hand side. Again, right, left and right are independent. And then if you wanted to go big and go home as far as getting both the soul and the champion, you essentially have to do both sides entirely, but one side first to go through the key, get the soul or the champion, get the double key node at the bottom, and then you have to go down the other side, do the exact same thing. So basically it's the cost of both of these paths added up together plus the 2,000 to get the double key node, for a grand total of 178,100 points. Now as always, that is a lot of numbers that I just threw out at you, so let's hop into the spreadsheet, which will be linked in the description box down below if you'd like to take a look at this in greater detail, or recreate it for yourself in greater detail. But yeah, it's not looking that great, but nonetheless, in terms of the overall cost, you can see here in terms of the equivalent in terms of shards, basically what you need to know, 20 sacreds for the soul and or the champion, and 40 sacreds worth of shards if you wanted to get both of them combined. Generally speaking, I do not recommend pursuing both. I think getting the champion is going to be enough for most people. I do know that a lot of people are relatively obsessed with chasing souls, and they feel like champions cannot be used without souls, but that to me is kind of a spender's luxury, at least for, from my perspective as a free-to-play player. You just kind of get used to some champions on your account having souls and a bunch of them not having them, and that's just kind of how you have to play, unless you're willing to burn bunch of resources chasing all of these things down. But I always reserve the right, and I think it's just better for, you know, again, us low spender / free to play players, where we just kind of farm up the souls that we need from the soul shop, the soul merchant, over time, and just kind of get souls that way. But anyways, yeah, this path is pretty darn simple and straightforward. Everything is kind of isolated, so to speak. So 20 sacreds if you wanted to go for the soul, 20 sacreds you wanted to go for the champion, 40 sacreds or the equivalent if you wanted to go for both. And then of course you can mix and match the different shard types depending upon your goals, depending upon which champions you want to select for the progressive chance events going on over the weekend. There are 2 sets of champions. And I think I forgot to even touch on the fact that this is a summon rush, obviously, but also it is partially dungeon divers, meaning that you can and will get some credit for running some dungeons and or the campaign. So if you look at the left-hand side of this tab, you can see our breakdown for each, or how many points you're really going to be getting for running each of the most commonly run stages in terms of dungeons and or the campaign. And the main takeaway here could be either looking at the average coins per run or the average coins per energy, depending upon how you like to look at it. So the most efficient stage in terms of coins per energy is going to be normal mode stage 20. That's always been the case. But if you want the most coins per run on average, because you're just getting higher tier gear on average, then hard mode 10 would be the best bet for that. On the far left, there is also a section for the campaign. Most people run stage 12-3 on brutal, so you will get some credit in terms of coins for that. But of course, it's going to be a lot less than if you were to run some of the dungeons. So the main takeaway here is that the rewards are going to be relatively expensive no matter what you do, whether you're going for the champion or the soul. I don't really recommend going for both unless you really want to get the massive boost in stats immediately. I do think it's better for people to go for the champions. If you don't have them, go for the soul if you already have the champion, of course. And then if you really feel like you need the soul down the line, you can farm up through the soul merchant, at least up to 4-star. You don't really need the 5-star on him because the accuracy and resistance won't really benefit his kit. He doesn't place any debuffs aside from block revive, which is a pseudo debuff, so to speak. And of course, you're not going to build him with a ton of resistance. That just doesn't really make sense in the kit. You'd build him maximizing damage as much as you possibly can. In terms of my specific strategy, though, of course, I will be waiting until the last day to summon. You can see that the event has gone live today, so I'm not going to pull my shards on day 1 because I want to pull as few shards as possible. So ideally, I can get this down, or I guess the equivalent cost, I can get it from 20 down to 16 maybe over the course of 4 days, maybe 17. It kind of depends on what I'm doing. I do know that there is a champion training tournament starting tomorrow, so I will be focusing on that pretty much probably the entire time, to be honest, just because it's champion training. There's a 4-star basalt up for grabs, which for me, I'm basically at this point using those to try and create a 6-star relics. I've made my first one a couple of weeks ago, and I also do need to technically finish the Hagaba fusion. I have until tomorrow's reset, as you can see here, to wrap it up, and I've just been waiting a little bit lazily, so to speak. But I know that typically the last day of the fusion is when they usually have a champion training or champion training event or tournament, and I know I can get points for leveling up the last rares, and then fusing and leveling up the last epic. Obviously, I could have gotten some CVC points for that, but we were winning our CVC, so I didn't really feel necessary to kind of push to do that. But that was always something in my back pocket. But anyways, haven't really finished the fusion, but I'm willing to be champion training. I have a couple of new champions to build as well, and I guess it would be nice to build Vargos as well because I know I'm going to be getting him. But nonetheless, we have some stuff to run in the campaign anyway, so it's kind of worth it for me to do that on my account. And for the rest of you, I'd recommend doing something similar. Maybe not running the campaign necessarily or doing champion training, but definitely make sure to farm some sort of dungeon. Could be the event dungeon, could be some core dungeon like farming speed and dragon, farming savage and fire knight, whatever tickles your fancy. But just run some dungeons, offset the cost of some of the shards that you might have pulled if your goal is to get some of the rewards here, and just make it cheaper for yourself if you're willing to wait. However, the one caveat there is if you want a chance, or you want a chance at a champion on the first 2 days of the Progressive Chance event, you have less time thus to work on that strategy. But if you're happy to be pulling on the second half of the champion selection, then you can wait until the absolute last minute, so to speak, to pull your shards after you farmed enough, or farmed as much as you could of some sort of dungeon to get Dungeon Divers credit. So yeah, that's going to do it for the free-to-play review of the Devious Path event. Let me know what your plan is relative to this path. Are you just skipping it entirely because you don't really care about the champion? That is totally valid. And of course, we're outside of the fusion at this point, so you don't necessarily have to worry about that. You could be stockpiling for the next fusion, assuming it's good or better than Hagaba is. Are you going for the champion? Do you already have the champion because you got lucky? Or are you going just for the soul? Let me know all of that and more in the comment section down below. As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. It really just help out the channel, and feel free to hit the subscribe button down below as well, if and only if you're enjoying the content overall on this channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.